The story begins in a quiet stretch of Oregon where the pine forests grow too tall, too still, and too silent, as if the trees themselves have learned to keep secrets. On the edge of this silence stands the Harlow estate, a vast and aging fortress of rotting wood, blackened windows, and a gate that hasn't opened for strangers in decades. People in town pretend they aren't curious, pretend the place doesn't bother them, but everyone knows better than to look too long when they drive past. There are some places that don't just hold stories, they hold curses. And this one breathes. For years, the Harlows moved like ghosts, rarely seen, never spoken to, until whispers began to spread about the family's next generation, about the strange twin children who were never sent to school, never allowed to play, never allowed to exist beyond the estate walls. The few who caught glimpses swore the twins never walked apart, always side by side, quiet, staring with unsettling eyes that didn't reflect innocence but fate. No one knew what kind of life they lived inside those walls. No one dared to question it. Not until the day the rumors turned into something darker, more sinister, and impossible to ignore. It began with a storm, the kind that howls through timber and shakes the bones of the earth, when a violent flash of lightning revealed silhouettes moving in the mansion's top floor, shapes locked too close, too intimate, too wrong. The next morning, the town didn't just whisper. It shook. Word spread that the twins were not simply siblings bound by blood, but bound in a union forced upon them by a dynasty obsessed with its own unholy legacy. What the town didn't yet know was that this was not a recent corruption, it was a tradition carved in secrecy, fed by fear, strengthened by silence, and protected by generations willing to sacrifice their humanity to keep their blood untouched. Now the ground around the estate feels colder. The windows seem to watch. And those who once turned away now find themselves pulled toward the truth, even though every instinct screams to leave it buried. Because the Harlow dynasty is dying, and dying things cling desperately. And when a secret this monstrous begins to unravel, it doesn't come quietly. It comes screaming, clawing, and dragging the living into the darkness with it. In the quiet expanse of rural Oregon, the town exists in a strange balance of normalcy and dread, and at the heart of that unease stands the Harlow estate, a sprawling mansion that feels less like a home and more like a relic buried alive. From a distance, it seems frozen in time, its weather-beaten wood and looming towers swallowed by towering pines that press around it like guards. The place almost hums with a presence, as though every window, every doorframe, every crooked corridor holds its breath to keep the horrors inside from slipping out. The town has grown used to its silhouette on the hills, but familiarity never brought comfort. Instead, it nurtured fear. The house does not feel abandoned, it feels watchful. It feels deliberate. Stories drift through diners, gas stations, schoolyards, and church parking lots about what really happens behind that rusted gate. Whispers of shadows moving through candlelit halls. Children who never smile. Curtains that flutter even when there is no wind. No one in living memory has ever been welcomed in, and yet somehow everyone believes they know what lives there: wealth, power, loneliness, and something else that has no name. Attempts to describe it come out as nervous laughter, quick glances over shoulders, and unfinished sentences. The Harlows themselves are spoken about like phantoms. Sightings are rare. A black car passing silently down the road. A pale figure standing at a window at dusk. A delivery left at the gate, retrieved by unseen hands. The family has money, that much everyone knows, enough to build walls not only of wood and iron, but of fear and superstition. The town pretends indifference. They claim they don't care, that the estate is just an old house and the Harlows are simply private people. But it's a lie everyone participates in. At night, the whispers grow darker, the rumors more grotesque. Parents warn their children never to wander near the property. Teenagers dare each other to stand at the gate after midnight, but even the bravest don't last long before the cold air presses too heavy on their lungs and they run. The town does not merely ignore the estate, it reveres it like something dangerous, something sacred in its wrongness, something that has watched them for generations and is not done watching yet. Inside the Harlow estate, the twins grow up in a world carefully constructed to keep them separate from everything beyond the iron gates, a world where the house itself becomes their universe and their prison at the same time. Their childhood is defined by silence, routine, and watchful supervision, with every movement observed, every question discouraged, and every instinct trained into obedience. They are never sent to school, never walked through town, never allowed to feel the normal chaos of life. Instead, they are taught by private tutors who speak softly, rarely make eye contact, and leave as quickly as they arrive, as though staying longer might let the house swallow them too. The twins move through endless halls lined with portraits of stern ancestors, their faces frozen in expressions that look less like pride and more like warning. Tradition is drilled into them before they even understand what it means. They are constantly reminded that they are special, chosen, different from everyone else, and that the outside world is dirty, unworthy, dangerous. Their parents do not nurture them with warmth but with rules. They do not raise children, they shape heirs. The twins grow closer because they are all they have. They eat together, study together, sleep in connected rooms, and exist under the belief that they are not two lives, but one expectation split into two bodies. Servants whisper that the children never laugh, that their footsteps barely make sound, that when they speak to each other, it is in low tones as if the walls are listening. Sometimes people from town swear they saw them at an upstairs window, standing shoulder to shoulder, staring outside with a longing so heavy it seemed to press against the glass. Other times, it feels like they never existed at all, like the estate created them out of darkness and duty. The strangest part is that the twins are never treated like ordinary siblings. Every interaction around them feels ceremonial, rehearsed, as if they are being prepared for something unspeakable that even they don't fully understand. Their childhood isn't childhood at all, it is a slow conditioning, a careful shaping of minds and loyalty, an erasure of individuality so complete that by the time they are old enough to question anything, the truth already has its claws too deep to escape. When the twins grow older, the quiet mystery surrounding them curdles into something far more disturbing, and the town realizes that whatever secrecy the Harlows were guarding was never meant to stay hidden forever. It begins with slips in conversation from staff who don't return to work, quick departures in the night, quiet resignations that no one openly explains. Then there are the documents that accidentally surface, old records with altered dates, legal papers that don't make sense, and hushed talk of a ceremony that was never meant to be public knowledge. Soon the whispers grow bold enough to escape the shadows, and rumors take shape into something real and sickening. The twins have not merely been raised together, they have been bound together. Not partners by choice, not victims of coincidence, but participants in a union orchestrated by their own parents in the name of preserving a bloodline that values legacy over humanity. The town's disbelief turns to horror. Some refuse to accept it, insisting it's an exaggerated legend meant to frighten children, but the silence from the estate speaks louder than any denial could. No one from the family steps forward to dismiss the claims. No statement is made. Instead, the estate grows quieter, more guarded, as though the truth has finally slipped through its cracks and now must be contained at any cost. Those who dare talk about it describe the twins being prepared for this fate since childhood, molded into roles they never chose, convinced that sacrifice was duty and obedience was destiny. They weren't guided toward lives of their own, they were conditioned to believe their lives already belonged to something ancient and merciless. It becomes clear that this wasn't a spontaneous act of madness. It was planned. It was cultivated. It was the ultimate expression of control. The town feels the weight of it like a stain spreading across its history, realizing they had always sensed something was wrong but never imagined it would descend to this level of cold, engineered cruelty. People begin to see the estate differently after this revelation. It is no longer merely a place of wealth, secrecy, and isolation. It is a monument to a decision that defies morality, a house built not only with stone and money, but with generations of silence that allowed something monstrous to grow unchecked, until the line between loyalty and horror vanished completely. When the truth about the twins begins to surface, it doesn't appear as a single shocking revelation but as a slow unearthing of horrors buried beneath decades of carefully crafted lies. Old journals are discovered hidden in attic trunks and sealed chests, written in the strict handwriting of ancestors who believed tradition was worth more than morality. These worn pages speak of rituals disguised as legacy, of family pride twisted into obsession, and of a lineage so obsessed with purity that it erased the very concept of right and wrong. Generations of Harlows had participated in this darkness long before the twins were even born. It wasn't a mistake or a sudden collapse of sanity in the present generation. It was a doctrine passed down like an heirloom, protected by wealth, silence, and fear. Each diary entry reads like a confession without guilt, describing arrangements made in secret rooms, ceremonies performed under dim candlelight, and vows forced upon family members who had never been given a life of their own. The language is cold, calculated, almost clinical, as if the writers were documenting business transactions rather than irreversible destruction of their blood. Those who find these journals realize the horror stretches back more than a century, each generation participating, each generation convincing themselves it was necessary, each generation pushing the curse further instead of breaking it. The family treated this grotesque practice as honor, as preservation, as something noble rather than something monstrous. Every ancestor mentioned in town history books suddenly becomes darker, every portrait hanging inside the estate feels like it is staring with sick approval, every Harlow legacy suddenly reeks of decay. The discovery doesn't just expose the truth about the twins, it exposes an entire dynasty built on cruelty. What once seemed like strict tradition now reveals itself as deliberate conditioning, a cycle maintained through psychological control, isolation, and threats disguised as duty. The journals also detail how anyone who resisted was removed, controlled, or erased, their lives swallowed by the estate just like forgotten servants and silenced children. The town realizes they were never just neighbors to a strange wealthy family. They were living beside a generational cult hidden behind luxury, reputation, and fear. And now that the truth has slipped free, it carries with it the weight of every life crushed under the family name, reminding everyone that this horror was never born suddenly. It was carefully raised, protected, and worshipped for over 100 years. As the generations of secrecy stretch forward from the past into the present, the cost of this twisted dynasty begins to reveal itself in ways that can no longer be hidden, bleeding through the family's perfect facade in the form of physical frailty, unstable minds, and an atmosphere of decay that clings to the estate like a living thing. Strange illnesses begin appearing in the bloodline, conditions doctors quietly question but never publicly challenge because the Harlows wield too much power for anyone to confront them directly. Children are born too fragile, too haunted, as if they arrive in this world already burdened with the sins of those who came before them. Some grow up strange and distant, speaking to things no one else can see, staring for too long at empty corners, reacting to whispers that don't exist. Others simply don't grow up at all, fading away behind closed doors and quiet funerals where even grief feels rehearsed rather than real. The house, once a symbol of wealth, becomes a vessel of suffering, where laughter is rare and silence is broken only by restless footsteps and hushed arguments behind locked doors. Servants tell stories of hearing screams late at night, quickly muffled, or the unsettling sound of weeping echoing through hallways when every room is supposedly empty. There are rumors of distant cousins who vanished after questioning the family's traditions, of relatives sent away under vague reasons and never spoken of again, their existence erased as easily as dust wiped from a photograph. Even the town begins to feel the ripple of it, sensing something deeply wrong with anyone bearing the Harlow name, like an invisible rot that spreads beyond the walls. The longer the dynasty continues its obsession with bloodline preservation, the more cursed it becomes, its members breaking down under the psychological weight of expectations they never chose and the physical toll of a lineage pushed beyond nature. Madness and anguish become as inherited as wealth, passing down like heirlooms, and the estate grows darker with every generation, a place where life doesn't flourish but deteriorates, where children don't play but endure, where existence itself feels like a debt owed to a legacy that refuses to release its grip even as everything it touches begins to crumble. As the years pass and the truth about the Harlow dynasty begins creeping through cracks of silence, the estate itself seems to respond, as if the walls have grown restless from holding so many secrets for so long, and the town starts witnessing things they cannot explain. On fog-heavy nights, people swear they hear sounds drifting from the mansion even though no one is supposed to be awake at those hours. Faint sobbing carried on the wind, desperate whispers swallowed by trees, the echo of something slamming inside when every window appears still. Some claim they've seen figures moving behind the darkened glass, silhouettes pacing hallways that shouldn't be lit, shadows pausing as if they know they are being watched before slipping away. Children in town talk about seeing lights flicker in the abandoned upper rooms or strange faces staring out with hollow expressions that vanish the second someone looks twice. Even those who never believed in anything beyond the tangible begin feeling uneasy passing the property. Animals refuse to go near the gate. Birds avoid landing on the roof. The air itself feels heavier the closer anyone gets, as if the ground surrounding the estate is saturated with years of anguish and fear. Nighttime becomes a breeding ground for legends. Drivers traveling past the property late in the evening talk about seeing someone standing at the wrought iron fence, unmoving, watching the road with an expression no one can quite describe before disappearing into the darkness as if swallowed by the earth itself. Others whisper about the faint sound of children crying somewhere deep in the house when there should no longer be children living there at all, and sometimes there is a scream that starts sharp but ends abruptly, cut off mid-breath, like someone silenced it before the world could hear too much. The estate feels alive, not in any comforting way, but like a wound that refuses to close, pulsing with the weight of everything it has hidden. The town begins to understand that the horrors of the Harlow family never stayed confined to blood or history. They seeped into walls, into soil, into memory, until the estate itself became a living echo of pain that refuses to fade, reminding everyone who dares to look too closely that some places are built not to shelter life, but to trap the darkness it creates. When the estate can no longer contain its own secrets, someone from outside finally dares to do what the town never had the courage to attempt, and that is to step beyond the rusted gate with the intention of discovering the truth rather than running from it. This outsider is not driven by thrill or curiosity alone, but by something deeper, a need to understand why so many lives surrounding the Harlow name end in silence and why the air around the estate feels haunted even in daylight. They begin by studying the town's history, speaking to the few former staff members willing to talk, and slowly gather fragments of stories that no one ever stitched together because fear always stopped them halfway. Late one night, under a sky swallowed by clouds, this determined soul slips onto the property, moving through the overgrown garden and rotting pathways that lead toward the mansion. The house looms ahead like a slumbering beast, ancient and waiting, and for a moment it almost feels like it knows someone has finally come to pry it open. Inside, the air smells of dust and something older, something metallic and stale, as though time itself has been suffocating within the walls. Rooms are filled with locked cabinets, sealed drawers, and shelves of documents no living person has touched in years. Eventually, a hidden panel is discovered, leading to a staircase descending into darkness beneath the estate, a place never meant for sunlight and never meant for strangers. Down there lies the true heart of the dynasty, a labyrinth of stone tunnels carved beneath the house like veins, lined with records, sealed crates, and preserved artifacts that tell the story the Harlow family spent generations burying. There are files documenting bloodlines, medical records that never saw hospitals, photographs carefully hidden to erase certain faces from history, and chilling evidence of lives controlled and destroyed in the name of legacy. The outsider realizes the horror wasn't simply tradition, it was methodical, organized, protected by wealth, and executed with cold precision. Every lie the family told was supported by meticulous planning. Every life confined within the estate was documented like inventory. Moving deeper, the air grows colder, as if every cry ever silenced still lingers in the stone. The outsider understands that this isn't just discovery, it's trespassing into something sacred to the family and monstrous to everyone else, and once a truth like this is seen, it can never be unseen. Inside the mansion, while the outside world inches closer to uncovering the unimaginable, the twins themselves begin to fracture beneath the weight of the destiny that has been forced upon them, and for the first time in their carefully controlled lives, doubt worms its way into the cracks of their obedience. What once felt like duty now feels like suffocation. The routines that once shaped their existence now feel like chains. They begin to see their parents not as guardians of honor and tradition, but as architects of a prison built from lies, manipulation, and fear. Every whispered assurance they were raised on begins to unravel in their minds, and the unity that once bound them becomes strained by conflicting emotions. One twin clings desperately to the only truth they've ever known, terrified of what life means without the structure they were raised to accept, while the other starts to question everything, recognizing the cruelty hidden beneath the word legacy. Their once synchronized footsteps now hesitate. Their conversations grow tense, filled with suppressed anger, confusion, and an ache neither of them knows how to speak out loud. They were raised to be inseparable, but now their bond becomes a battlefield between loyalty and rebellion. Memories they once ignored start haunting them in sharper clarity, the locked doors, the whispered arguments late at night, the way servants would look away in pity, the way their parents never spoke to them like children but like property. The house, once their entire world, now feels smaller, its hallways pressing in like lungs tightening, walls that once protected now looming like witnesses to a crime that never ends. They begin to notice how the estate watches them, how every room holds evidence of how deeply their lives were planned without their consent. For the first time, the twins see themselves not as chosen, but as condemned. And while fear hangs heavy between them, something new begins to stir beneath it, something dangerous and fragile. The idea that they could break away, that the cycle could end with them, that they do not have to continue being sacrifices to a bloodline that values its own survival more than the humanity of the children trapped within it. As the tension inside the estate builds to an unbearable breaking point, the fragile balance holding the Harlow dynasty together finally shatters when one twin decides they cannot remain bound to the fate that has been carved into their life since birth. Quiet defiance turns into silent planning, secret thoughts turn into whispered conversations, and the once unshakable loyalty between them becomes a line drawn in shadow. The twin who dares to dream of freedom begins mapping out possibilities in stolen moments, collecting keys, memorizing hallways, studying the behavior of the household, and imagining a world beyond the iron gate that has always marked the boundary of their existence. But breaking a tradition this deeply rooted is not as simple as running. The estate feels alive with suspicion. The parents sense a shift, a loosening in the obedient silence they once controlled so easily, and fear hardens into anger. They tighten rules, increase surveillance, and attempt to chain the twins emotionally by reminding them of everything they owe to the family name, twisting guilt into shackles. Conversations become confrontations. Love becomes weaponized. The house, once eerily quiet, now trembles with arguments, threats, tears, and the choking panic of lives that finally realize how badly they have been stolen from. The loyal twin becomes torn apart, trapped between the terror of disobeying everything they were raised to believe and the growing realization that continuing down this path means losing themselves entirely. Their conflict becomes dangerous, because hesitation in a place like this invites punishment. When the attempt to escape finally begins, it does not unfold as a quiet disappearance. It erupts like a storm inside the walls, dragging everyone into its chaos. Doors slam, secrets spill, accusations fly, and for the first time, the dynasty is forced to face the consequences of the life it has built. The parents lose their composure, their refined control crumbling into desperation and fury, exposing the monstrous obsession beneath their polished exterior. The carefully hidden darkness of the estate bursts into the open, and the house that once thrived on silence now shakes with the sound of rebellion. In that moment, the Harlow legacy is no longer an untouchable force of tradition. It becomes something frantic, wounded, and dangerous, fighting violently to survive even as it begins tearing itself apart from the inside. Even after the chaos of rebellion seems to have ended, and the town begins to whisper that the Harlow dynasty has finally crumbled, the estate does not settle into silence. The outward appearance of ruin masks a truth that few are willing or able to acknowledge. The family's influence, their secrets, and their obsession with preserving their bloodline did not die with the collapse of the parents' control. What the outsiders witness, the boarded windows, the empty hallways, the overgrown gardens, is merely the surface of a force that has learned to endure through shadow, patience, and cunning. The surviving twin, though shaken and scarred, carries within them the weight of generations, a living vessel of the dynasty's obsession, knowledge, and hidden rituals. They are no longer simply a victim but a reluctant heir to a legacy that refuses to die, and their understanding of the house, its tunnels, its records, and its secrets is deeper than anyone outside could ever imagine. Even those who believed the family was destroyed begin noticing signs, subtle movements behind curtains, doors opening and closing on their own, lights flickering where no one should be, the faintest echo of footsteps in abandoned rooms. It becomes clear that the estate itself seems to pulse with life, almost as if it has absorbed the will of the family over generations and now acts as a guardian of what remains. The legacy is no longer in the hands of tyrannical parents or hidden documents, but embodied in someone who knows how to survive, manipulate, and endure within the very walls that shaped them. The town, once obsessed with exposing the family, gradually learns that some truths cannot be fully unearthed, some horrors cannot be entirely destroyed, because they have been nurtured into resilience, cunning, and secrecy that outlasts any confrontation. The surviving twins' presence transforms the estate from a symbol of oppression into a vessel of continuity, a silent witness and active participant in ensuring that the dynasty's shadow continues to linger. Outsiders may believe the family is gone, that the dynasty has ended, and that the estate is nothing more than a haunted relic, but the truth is far darker. The Harlow bloodline, its rituals, its obsessions, and the lessons drilled into those who survived are still alive, quietly waiting, and poised to continue in ways the town cannot anticipate. The collapse of the household's authority is only a beginning, not a conclusion, because as long as someone remains to carry its knowledge, the dynasty's influence is never truly extinguished, and the shadow it casts stretches long and far beyond the confines of the crumbling estate.